to avoid death, although how you can avoid death is clearly mentioned in Bhagavad Gita and other literature of the esoteric teaching. Birth, death, old age and disease, anxiety and suffering. These are the real problems of life. The materialistic leaders do not know how to solve these problems. They are simply engaged in some temporary business of politics. They are making so many big plans, big diplomacy, and so much unnecessary fighting, simply increasing the problems in the material world. They do not even touch the real problems of life because they do not know how to solve them. The leaders claim that they are working on solutions to problems like crime, poverty, and terrorism. But this is a false promise, a post-dated check. If they really knew how to stop these things, they would have stopped them already. The materialistic leaders have had more than enough time to stop these problems, but they are not stopping them. If anything, the figures show that they are making them worse. This proves the materialistic leaders are incompetent to stop the real problems of life. The leaders want to solve these problems, but because they are ignorant and materialistic, they cannot understand how. We students of the esoteric teaching are nonviolent. We do not want to overthrow the leaders, but we want to educate them. This is our value proposition. They are wasting so much time, effort, and money on ineffective solutions. We want an opportunity to show how this esoteric teaching can solve all the problems of material existence. In God's kingdom, there is no scarcity, no crime, and no anxiety. If one wants to free oneself from anxiety, one should immediately take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in Vaikuntha by chanting his holy name, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. You should understand this fact. This esoteric teaching is not an ordinary sentimental religion. The esoteric teaching is the application of the Vedic science of consciousness to solving all the problems of life. Take these instructions seriously, experience it for yourself, and see. So we are not simply preaching Hindu religion or this religion or that religion. No. We go back to the original source materials on the nature and function of consciousness in the world. And what is the function of consciousness? Mainly, it is life. We see that life comes from life. There is no instance that you can find in any scientific literature or any other literature where living beings are born from non-living. Every living creature reproduces in a certain way, and by different means they propagate their own species. We do not see that one species gives birth to another species, nor do we see, in actual fact, one species evolve into another species. It simply does not happen. And there really is nothing in the fossil record or anything to indicate that it does. So, life begets life. Consciousness begets consciousness. Wisdom begets wisdom. So, in this material world, without wisdom, we're lost. We will spend so much time trying this and trying that, trying to solve the problems of life, but without real spiritual wisdom, we will not be able to do it. So in this world, there is so much anxiety because, basically, we are eternal beings and we are trying to live in a non-eternal world. Everything in this material world is temporary. We've heard this again and again. But what does it mean? It means that one cannot be really happy here. In this world, there's always going to be some anxiety that even if I have a good position or even if I have some enjoyment, that I'll lose it. Because things are always changing here. That's the nature of the material world. But the purpose of material life is to live simply and peacefully, without anxiety and perform the process of self-realization so that one can find one's real eternal spiritual form and go back to the spiritual world and be happy. We can never be perfectly happy in this material world, but we can be perfectly happy in the spiritual world. So the aim of life, the purpose of human life, is to reawaken our original spiritual consciousness and go back to the spiritual world. We have really no business being here. What is the purpose of spiritual beings living in the material world? It's crazy. It doesn't work. It's a completely incompatible situation. Of course we're suffering because we're away from our real home. So the business of every human being in this material world is to acquire spiritual wisdom and to perform the process of self-realization and go back to home, back to the spiritual world where they belong. By extension, the purpose of the government is to facilitate that process. So the real business of the government is simply keeping the peace. The government is like a police force, that when some rogues come along who want to disturb the peace of society, the government is there to stop them, to punish them, to take them out of circulation. But that doesn't mean that the government can adopt these powers beyond its fiat given by the law of God and create more anxiety for the living entities. But that's what they're doing. By unnecessarily creating war, by unnecessarily getting involved in different political schemes, by unnecessarily trying to push the material development, economic development, and so on beyond the boundaries of what is good for the planet, they have created so much bad karma, and now everyone is suffering. But since they don't understand how their actions are creating this suffering, they themselves are the cause of the problems that they are trying to solve. So when the government says, we are working on stopping terrorism, we are working on stopping war, we're working on stopping this problem and that problem, they don't realize that actually they are the source of all these problems. Their actions are the cause of all these problems. Their policies are the real cause of the anxiety and suffering in the world today. They don't realize this because they have no spiritual knowledge. So we are not advocating revolution or the overthrow of the government or anything like that. We are advocating the education of the leaders in the Vedic spiritual wisdom so that they can govern effectively. If the government understood the real science of God and the real spiritual cause of everything, as well as the real spiritual purpose of life, they could manage things in such a way that everyone would have facility for spiritual growth and could attain their real, eternal, perfect body. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of My Perfect Body. This is David Hughes, your host, reminding you to visit us on the web at esotericteaching.org.